I have a fantastic show for you today with a couple of free goodies, so make sure to stick around. But to go through some of the biggest stories in America for conservatives, for patriots, for those that have common sense and want to see our country survive, I've brought on Dr. Steve Turley to join me. Dr. Turley, thank you so much for joining me.
Steven, it's an honor. It's great to be back with you, man.
So I think this is our third show. You've got a great channel. Let me just give some background for people that maybe don't know you. Dr. Turley holds a PhD from Durham University. You taught theology, social theorists, classic Christian education. You're a prize-winning classical guitarist. You have a YouTube channel like mine with 1.2 million subscribers, 15 million listeners. On your podcast show, plus you're on Rumble and X. You've probably noticed this. I've noticed this. There is a massive shift happening, right? This, what is it that you call where a private person is rising, right? And that is obviously Donald J. Trump. And what we're seeing is this crossover. I read over the weekend that we've never had more registered Republicans in an election.
Right.
I read that based on trending news, Trump is looking at picking up North Carolina. Mm-hmm. He's trending towards picking up Virginia. And they say whether he wins Pennsylvania or not, Pennsylvania by 2028 will be a completely red state. What are your thoughts on all this transition, especially with celebrities like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr.?
Yeah, right. Coming on in and realigning. Yeah, it's incredible stuff. I think we're going through a realignment right now, a massive political realignment. It's happening all over the world, particularly in Europe and Latin America. And it's a realignment around a vertical political division as opposed to a horizontal political division. So that I find that's really the best way of understanding it. So we tend to think of political division horizontally, left versus right, liberals versus conservatives, Republicans versus Democrats, whatever. But what we're seeing today is much, much more indicative of what is classically known as populism. And what populists do is they really literally stand that divide on its head. It's not so much a horizontal divide anymore. It's a vertical divide. It's a divide between the people versus the political class, the ruled versus the rulers, the ordinary citizen versus the oligarchs. Back in 2010, Scott Rasmussen and Doug Schoen, so Republican and Democrat pollster each, they published a very interesting book called Mad as Hell. It was about the Tea Party movement at the time. And what they found back then was evidence that they were already seeing this shift. When they were interviewing people, part of the Tea Party movement, what characterized virtually everyone in there is they didn't care if you were Republican or Democrat. It just seemed once you got to Washington, you just did the same thing. It was a uniparty. It was a duopoly. So they felt like there was a ruling class that ruled in accordance with their own values, interests, and concerns for their own political and economic benefit that was seemingly always at odds with the values, interests, and concerns of the people. And it started like that in the Tea Party movement, and it blossomed on the right through Trump, but it also started blossoming on the left with Bernie Sanders in 2016, 2020, and then with RFK in 2024. And, you and I were talking beforehand, before the interview. I mean, there was just some real excitement of what happens if they were to align, because it's not, again, the horizontal, it's not a horizontal divide anymore. It's not left versus right. Yes, we have policy issues. Yes, we have ideological differences and so forth, but we are all totally united in this notion that the permanent political class in power today rules for their own benefit, which is at the expense of the values, interests, concerns of the people. And that's just that literally has no limit to how it could grow. If you define the divide horizontally, there's a limit to how much the right can grow, and there's a limit to how much the left can grow. But if it's a vertical divide, if it's the people versus political class, you have a political movement capable of amassing over 100 million people in this country, no problem whatsoever. So if that's the case, then I don't think it's coincidence that we're beginning to see people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Russell Brand, and even Jordan Peterson, who can't vote. He's a Canadian citizen, but even he's coming out and saying, if I were an American citizen, if I could vote, I would vote for Trump, and here's why. And then what comes out of his mouth is not ideology. It's not political partisanship. It really is this notion that the people are increasingly being ruled by a political class that's not allowing them to dissent from that rule. And that's not right. They're corrupt. They're ruling for their own political and economic advantage at the expense of what's good for the country. And the people are pushing back. The wider population is pushing back. So I think that's what you're seeing. And if, you mentioned Pennsylvania, I think it was James Carville who once defined Pennsylvania as Philadelphia on one side, Pittsburgh on the other side, and Alabama in between. So we're basically seeing Alabama getting mobilized now with this political realignment. And if that happens, I think they may very well relegate Philly and Pittsburgh to the political periphery.
Yeah, no, you make a really great point. Like, I just want to like maybe add to that. It's like, okay, so you have like Trump on the right, you have Biden and Kamala on the left. You then have like a really far left, which is like the squad of super progressive women in the Democrat Party. But then you have like an RFK Jr. And if you can get his people to go, wait a minute, if we join forces with Trump, and we stack, we don't agree on everything, but maybe we can get more done together, right? Like, I just watched a speech with RFK Jr., and he said that in our food in America, there are 1,000 toxic poisons that are allowed into our food that are banned in Europe.
Wow.
And so he says, one of these chemicals is enough to make you sick: asthma, exhaustion, cancer, heart disease, whatever. Now you start stacking these. He said the food industry is essentially poisoning our children, and we don't know it because we trust that the government is going to help us. So you see someone like RFK Jr. that goes, okay, I don't exactly agree with everything about Donald Trump, but if he will unleash me to go make America healthy again, I will do it. Right. Yes. And so, this political populism, this uprising of, we want to do what's best for the people, where the elites are like, we want to do what's best for our corporate donors.
Exactly.
There is a huge divide. Absolutely.
Exactly. It's technically referred to as civilizational populism, because populism in of itself doesn't tell you very much about the movement, because you could have populist left, you could have populist right. Ironically, since they're redefining the divide, but a populist movement, like in the populism in Latin America, often tends to be very leftist, very socialist, Marxist, that kind of thing. So it's more of a structural politics as opposed to a systematic politics, populism. So you need something to fill it in. It's technically known, they call it as a thin ideology. You need some thickness to come in and give it substance. And that's where civilizationalism is coming in. And civilizationalism basically reinterprets that divide as a battle between a liberal globalist elite versus the people, who feel as if that liberal globalist elite have sold them out for their own benefit and aspiration. So they've sold us out in terms of our national sovereignty by opening up the border. They've sold us out economically in terms of the global division of labor, sending our manufacturing and industry jobs overseas so as to maximize their bottom line. They sold us out culturally in terms of replacing tradition and custom, and with identity politics that serve to further isolate particularly rural communities by reinterpreting our traditional customs and traditions as bigoted and racist and all kinds of phobic. So it's really interesting. Politicians have always been very nervous about the sentiment of resentment. Just ask Marie Antoinette what can happen when enough people start resenting their government. So what they try to do, and this has been going on for thousands of years, they try to redirect and deflect that resentment from themselves and put it on somebody else. Now, traditionally, it was always a foreign enemy. So the Athenians resented, Spartans, and the Romans resented Carthaginians and so forth. But our politicians, somewhere along the line, some scholars argue it's in the 1960s, our politicians start to figure out, wait a minute, if we actually divide the people, if we actually get half the nation to resent the other half, we'll always be needed in order to mediate and adjudicate this constant conflict. So today, for example, we are less racist than we have ever been. Every study shows that. Matthew Goodwin has documented that in his 2018 work on national populism, a British scholar. We are less racist than we've ever been. So if you ask people questions like, do you support interracial marriage, for example? In the 1950s, 90% of people said no way. Whereas today, 99% of people say, yeah, no problem. Would you work for someone of a different ethnicity? 1950s, I'd have a problem with that. Today, well, of course, it's just common, just what we do. So these racial indicators are at their lowest levels ever recorded in our country. And yet, what are we talking more about? Right? What's Matt what's his name from Daily Wire? His new movie, right?
Yeah,
Am I a racist? Right? I mean, it's crazy that all they want to talk about is race. Why? So as to divide us. And what civilizationalism is, in fact, saying, the real divide is not between us, not between the people. It's between us and these people who are constantly trying to get us to resent each other and impose these wedge issues on. That's what Kamala is doing with abortion. That's all they do. That's what they're doing with J6. That's all they do. They always try to make a portion of the population the object of resentment. And why do they find Trump and RFK and Tulsi so dangerous? Because they're the ones who pin resentment right back onto the government where it belongs.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, speaking of those big names, I have a bunch of questions that I still want to go through with you, but there's a very special event coming up in Orlando, Florida. You're going to be speaking there. I'm going to be speaking at your event. Let me just show that to people here. But it's Public Square on October 10th and 11th, where you can learn about building a parallel economy. You can hear from some of the most incredible conservative populist names like Russell Brand, Donald Trump Jr., RFK Jr., Tucker Carlson. They are all the keynote speakers, as well as yourself, Dr. Turley. But you guys at Turley Talks have a really incredible offer. They have two different tickets. They have a $1,000 VIP ticket, and they have a $200 ticket. And you guys are going to be helping people get a $200 ticket so that they can come and learn from these incredible people. But they also get to meet you, and they also get to meet me while we're there. Can you tell us a little bit more about this event and how you got involved in it?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, it's the guys who put together Public Square. They're there also. Red Balloon .work. Red Balloon, Andrew Krabuschetz, who puts that together. He's run that. That helps patriots basically find employment outside of woke environment. And we found out about it from them, and they're putting together this amazing parallel economy conference in Orlando. Let's just say, I believe is it the 9th or 10th and 11th? What was October?
10th and 11th.
10th and 11th. And so we wanted to help out and spread the word. And so they're graciously offering, if you click on the link below, they're graciously offering everybody who clicks on that link a free ticket. It's a $200 ticket, which includes being able to come out to our event. So we're going to have a meet and greet there. We're going to be talking about the parallel economy and why it's so important to build, how Trump has been at the forefront of it, particularly here in the United States, how it is actually a worldwide phenomenon that's happening all around the world. And so we're going to have a meet and greet. We're going to be able to chat and talk about all things, Trump and parallel economy and the like. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you for sure.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So I'm gonna put a link to paralleleconomysummit.com down below. You go in, you use code Turley, and you will get a $200 free ticket. Now, if you're not going to be in the Orlando area, don't sign up. But it's only for people that can make it on October 10th and 11th. But you have a new book coming out, Fight, that I see behind you, with Donald Trump just surviving his miracle assassination attempt. And you guys are going to be giving a free chapter of that book so that people can read it, see what's involved. I'm going to put a link to that down below as well. Just really briefly, and then I want to ask you like 3 or 4 more questions if you have time. Tell us about this book, Fight, and what we're going to learn.
Yeah, well, it's an important book, I think, to address a common misconception that I hear all the time. Unfortunately, even among our people on the MAGA movement, and that is this notion that the MAGA movement is somehow specific to America and specific to Trump. And I got to be honest. Obviously, that's a legitimate sort of inference, since it's "Make America Great Again," right? And it's Trump's own slogan. But what people have to understand is that Trump and MAGA are actually part of a much wider civilizational trend that's happening all over the world, particularly in Europe and Latin America. We are seeing virtually identical movements happening all over. So, of course, the Brexit movement with Nigel Farage. Boris Johnson actually referred to Brexit as making Britain great again. You have Marine Le Pen in France, George Meloni in Italy. You've got Viktor Orban of Hungary, who wants to make Europe great again. You got the Farmers' Revolt in the Netherlands, the Yellow Vest Uprising in France. But on the other side of the Atlantic, in Latin America, you have the extraordinary rise of Nayib Bukele, who's made El Salvador. He's transformed El Salvador from once per capita the single most violent country in the world to now per capita one of the safest countries in the world. And he was just reelected with 80% support. Javier Milei, he's come out and he has literally adopted MAGA to make Argentina great again. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, he was called the tropical Trump. So the book explores the various ways in which the Trump movement, the MAGA movement, is actually reflective of these much wider trends happening all over the world, where more and more populations are rejecting sort of this one-size-fits-all managerial liberal globalism and are instead returning back to nation, culture, custom, and tradition. And so I explore the various ways in which the MAGA movement is actually a uniquely American expression of that more worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah. I even saw over the weekend, they were having like parades and marches for Donald Trump in Japan.
Yeah.
Japan,
yeah.
Of all places,
cool.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's spreading this idea of, does the government have my best interest at heart? And I think people are waking up, as Alex Jones says, and they're realizing, no, they don't.
Right.
So we've got to come together. There's power in numbers, and we've got to take our country back. And so anyway, I'm grateful that you are allowing my community to participate in the book and also Public Square. It's going to be awesome. Donald Trump has been making a lot of promises lately, and nothing that I don't think he could fulfill on. I recently interviewed Stephen Moore, his top economist that helped make America very affordable, got us, some of the lowest inflation in American history under Donald Trump. I think everybody has nostalgia for the Trump years when life was affordable, right? And he talks about how they're going to have upwards of 500 executive orders ready to go for Trump in his first 100 days, things that will absolutely transform the country back to its greatness, right? And so what are some of the things that Trump has been saying that has caught your attention? For example, just a few from my own side. He talks about making life affordable by going after energy and just producing so much energy that your power bills come down, your gas bills come down. Around the world, farmers are like, okay, it takes less fuel to make food. It costs less to produce a car. He talks about shutting down the border. My gosh, we're spending $500 billion a year on 15 million illegal immigrants. Meanwhile, we have veterans and senior citizens that can't afford groceries. So he wants to close the border. He's talking about, removing tax on tips, removing tax on Social Security. What of what Trump has been saying has grabbed your attention?
Well, I was born in a middle-class neighborhood. No, I'm sorry. That's somebody else's answer. No, that's a great. I mean, what you just did summarized it beautifully. And I was also, I think we could add to that too, the devastation that's happened from this Hurricane Helene, particularly in North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, and just the seeming indifference of the Biden-Harris administration, very similar to what we saw in East Palestine after that train wreck and the chemicals that spilled into their water and their land. And so I think I would love to see, by the way, Trump. I heard he was supposed to visit North Carolina today. I would love to see him rise to the occasion like he did with the residents at East Palestine and bring much needed aid and help when the Biden White House is just AWOL on this sort of stuff. And Kamala, of course, she's just too clueless on that. For me, I tend to focus on a threefold structure of understanding the new kind of populist policies that are coming out. So there's border security, there's economic security, and there's cultural security. And if you look at what he's advocating, I mean, they literally, you can put them under either one of those three headings. The big one, of course, is he's got to get control over the border. I mean, there's just no way around that. And there's going to have to be mass deportations. The good news is when people find out, we saw this in 2017, when people find out about that, who are here illegally, they often leave on their own. So there's a lot of self-deportation that goes in there. But the mess that the Democrats have made of our nation demographically through this willful this willful sense of just reneging on their law enforcement responsibilities is just so beyond. I mean, again, it's just obviously Elon Musk thinks this is in the end for demographic change in order to have a permanent political power. I think he's there. That's the only possible rationale for what they're doing here. I think same thing is felt in Europe as well. So border security is the number one issue, at least for me. If you don't secure the border, everything else can be changed. That's the one thing that just can't be changed, is if you start letting in 15 million new citizens who are given automatic amnesty, we're done. It's over. I think the nation breaks up at that point, to be quite honest with you, like what we're seeing happening around the world. In terms of the economic security, 1,000%, that energy independence. It's a brilliant answer that he gives. If we're not energy independent, if we're beholden to any other nation for our energy, they can shut us down easily. One of the reasons why Russia's been able to absorb this blitzkrieg of sanctions that have been bombarded upon them, and I know you know this because you've talked about this, is they are a commodities-based culture. You can't shut them off. You can't lock them out of their bank account. You can't delete their bank account. Their bank account is food, it's grain, it's gas, it's fuel, and food and fuel always wins over finance every single day, because you can't eat your cash. You can't, your cash isn't going to keep you warm. You need commodities for the basic necessities of life. Maslow's hierarchy of needs are all commodity based at its most fundamental level. And Trump is saying our economy needs to be fundamentally a commodities economy. So all of the Austrian economists out there must be doing somersaults. They're finally so excited because a finance-based economy is a mirage. It's not real. The moment the finances drop, you're gone. But if you're a commodities-based economy, you always have the natural resources you need to function as a civilization. And then I think he is really pushing the end of wokeness, as it were, for the cultural security. I mean, he has basically, in effect, said that if he's president, wokeness is dead. We're going to drive a stake through the heart of wokeness. And I think all three of these things converge together in dismantling the administrative state, the deep state. And that's where RFK would be so stellar. There's no one I think the deep state fears more than Donald Trump and Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, they have to be freaking out. Like, oh my gosh, if these guys come in and take all these chemicals out, we've got to redo all of our recipes, which actually they don't. These same companies are making the same product in England and Europe, but without half the ingredients, because Americans don't realize that, that we're being poisoned by big food so that big pharma can make money off of our sickness. It's really, really disgusting.
It is.
You probably saw this. You probably reported on it. But just, I think it was Friday of last week, this report comes out from the head of ICE, who was put in charge by Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And it reveals over 420,000 criminals were released into the United States of America under Kamala Harris and under the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. Are Kamala and Mayorkas like trying to get Americans killed? Are they trying to sow chaos? Are they wanting gang wars between the gangs in Chicago and now the new Venezuelan gangs? Like, what were your thoughts on seeing just how many criminals, murderers, rapists have been purposely let into our country by Kamala and Alejandro Mayorkas?
Yeah, 13,000 murderers, if I recall. I mean, it's insane. And again, these are the ones that were caught, that we know of. The numbers probably double or triple that. Yeah, well, we do know, from what I understand, we do know that Venezuela has been emptying out their prisons. Why pay for it? Why pay for these criminals? just throw them out, send them to the Texas border. They'll take care of it. Yeah, the only thing I make sense of it out of two ways. First and foremost, the big picture is Democrats are post-American. They honestly believe that America is an evil place. You're seeing this. I'm sure you've seen this quite a bit in your research. They are saying openly things like, do we need to scrap the Constitution? The Constitution, let's be honest, it's probably the source of a lot of our problems. Let that hit you. After what you just described, they're going to turn around and say Jefferson and Madison were the source of our problems. Well, Jefferson didn't write the Constitution, but you get it. I just think they are post-American, and they do want to burn it all down. Again, you saw that in Matt Walsh's. I'm remembering now, Matt Walsh's movie. Am I a Racist? It was very fascinating because when you just let these people talk, they really hate America. They're post-American, and when you hate a country, you want to see it implode. And if they hated America and they were post-American, how else would you judge what they're doing at the southern border? You're right. They want to see us implode. What is it from the Batman movies? Some people just want to see the world burn. And I do. I think they just want to see America burn. Now there is a selfish element to that, in that the more chaos there is on our streets, the more they legitimize themselves as those who keep us safe. That we're in something called a risk society today. This is something that it's part of the rhetoric of our politics since the 1960s, that our our political class considers themselves indispensable because of all the risks we face, and they're the only ones that are able to effectively mitigate those risks. But now, of course, they're applying that to speech, and speech has to be regulated. Misinformation, disinformation have to be regulated because it's harmful to people. It's harmful to our democracy. So in the name of democracy, we have to crush it. Things like that. So I think there's a selfish element to it where it increases their power. That's the way to judge, I think, anything and everything that our government does. Anything. When Hillary Clinton was on Rachel Maddow's show talking about disinformation, when the author of the Russian collusion hoax was on the show of its biggest cheerleader and champion in the legacy media, when they're talking about cracking down on disinformation, making it illegal, sending people to jail over disinformation, it suddenly hits you. Oh, I get it. If disinformation increases the government's power, it's good. If disinformation dissents from and stands against the government's increase of power, it's bad. Got it. So that's the thing. What open borders has to, by definition, increase their power. The question now is just how. And I think in two ways: through legitimating the government through a risk society, by making society more violent, more tearing apart, so the government has to step in as the mitigator, the referee, the adjudicator of these conflicts, number one. And then number two, the cheap votes that they can get to keep them in power permanently.
Yeah. A thought that I've been having is, we need more Democrats in the working class, the middle class, lower income families to really see the damage that the Democrat Party is doing to them. For example, they say, oh, we as Americans, we should be very welcoming. We should let all of these people into our country. In fact, we should give them your hard-earned tax money while they get up on their feet. They can't get a job. They need $10,000 a month of food stamps. They need $21,000 a month of free hotels, right? They need to go into the school. Your child doesn't need an education, even though you and your house tax pays for that public education. Now we've got to give it to these illegal immigrants. And yet, look at what they're doing. They're flying hundreds of thousands of illegals into small towns. They're crushing middle-class America. They are taking over the school systems. They are bankrupting the hospitals. They're making your hard-earned dollar that is taxed compete with an illegal immigrant's free money, which is not taxed.
Right.
And so we, like you say, we need this parallel economy, but we need people to wake up. There's no greater example than this, right? The wealthy Democrats say, let them into your small towns, let them over the border, let them into your school, but you fly them to Martha's Vineyard.
Exactly.
And we'll throw an absolute fit. We can't have them in rich neighborhoods.
Nope.
So send them to the poor people in Chicago. Send them to the boroughs in New York. Send them to the small towns in Texas and Springfield, Ohio. What are your thoughts on them absolutely destroying these little middle-class America, because middle-class America isn't rising up against the wealthy and the Democrats?
Yeah, I think you said that brilliantly. I mean, and to make it even worse, the people who are advocating this don't pay a dime in taxes, to the extent that they are public workers, politicians. If taxes dried up tomorrow, and if there was no more money in the system whatsoever, what would happen to all these people's pay? Well, it would disappear, of course. Everybody works for the government. Every politician, outside of all of their kind of sleazy inside trading, but outside of all of that, if you're just looking at the money they're getting as a public servant, their money would dry up. Their bank accounts would go to zero. They don't pay a dime in taxes. They're paid by taxes. Their entire salaries are paid by taxes. They don't pay a dime. And yet they have this absolute arrogance to look at us and tell us how much we're going to be taxed and how we're going to use your tax dollars and the like, without the slightest sense of, we need to ask your permission before we do this. We need to make sure that what we're standing for is in line with your values, interests, and concerns. It's what Aristotle called back in the day Aristopopulism. You've got to, the only society that works is if you're always going to have an aristocracy. You're always going to have, like Jordan Peterson would say, you're always going to have with that Pareto principle, you're always going to have people on the top of the pyramid, as it were. But you got to make sure they share your values. And that's why we all love Trump, because he shares our values. When all said and done, he ain't perfect. You can pick apart whatever you don't like. But in the end, he's an aristocrat that's all about championing your values: border security, economic security, cultural security. Whereas these guys use their privileged positions to destroy all those securities. And they do it right in front of us. And like you said, I remember when Ron DeSantis flew out some of the illegal migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and they freaked out. Now, I couldn't help. I mean, the hypocrisy was just so thick. So I decided to put something up on my own personal Facebook, which I normally don't do. I keep my personal Facebook sort of political free because I've got old friends from high school, or I've got some colleagues from the university days that are all lefties. That there's a small number of them. I'd say about 2%, 3% of my friends on Facebook are kind of hardcore wokey woke and all that. That's about it. But I value the relationship. I don't need to anger them. I don't need to trigger them. I value the relationship over being right, as it were. So I don't tend to. I have my own public page on Facebook where I put this stuff up. But this one, I just had to, Stephen. I just had to. So I put it up there. And wouldn't you know it? Like I said, 2-3% of my friends are woke. Guess who all responded to that blatant hypocrisy? All the woke guys. And they were mad at me. How dare I exploit these poor, innocent migrants, try to land some political points. And I just, you write back. It was during the summer. So you write back, I had some time, and you're looking at this hive mind that, talk about a realignment, that looks at the law. It was really fascinating. Again, think about this. It's really fascinating. They were all about, I think DeSantis did something illegal. I mean, again, I'm just reading this going like, do you even hear yourselves? I think DeSantis did something illegal. Maybe this is the way he can get impeached. This is the way they were talking. And I'm thinking, you do know these were illegal migrants that he was sending over. Now you're becoming legalists. You're when it comes to the open border, then you're the most libertine people on the planet. But when it comes to Ron DeSantis buying some plane tickets, all of a sudden, you're the biggest legalists on the planet. What gives? And I just push back on them and say, look, in the end, you're just a bunch of cheap partisans. When all is said and done, he got you. He exposed your hypocrisy. Everybody sees it. Everybody is laughing at you right now. And they were. Eventually, all the more conservative friends came in and said, you guys are pathetic. They started, and they did like a hive of bees or something that started, they flew away. But I just looked and said, everybody sees it. You can't fool anyone. You're running around cheering open borders and sanctuary cities. And so the moment we say, okay, here you go. Okay, you have no problem with people walking through a door that should be locked. Okay, great. Let's open up your house now. Last I heard you lock your doors at night. I wonder why you do that. That's called a border, right? And the border it's not about hating the people on the outside. A border is always about loving the people on the inside. That's what a border is fundamentally about. That's why a responsible father locks the doors at night. That's why we do it. It's not because we hate the people outside. It's because we love the people on the inside. And what Ron DeSantis did in his brilliance, as well as Governor Abbott of Texas did with New York and Chicago, and I heard even Denver, to a certain extent, is sending them the migrants that they were arguing for, that they wanted. What he did is he exposed how radically hypocritical they are. That when all is said and done, as long as it hurts other people, as long as it inconveniences the people that ought to be inconvenienced. Yeah, like you guys in Springfield, Ohio, and so on. 60,000 population. Let's throw 20,000 Haitians in your mix. I mean, of course it's going to disrupt things. Doesn't matter. You deserve it because you don't vote the right way. Why? Anything that increases the establishment's power, that's good. Anyone who stands against that increase of power, that person needs to be run over. And that's what I just think this distribution, this obviously asymmetrical, disproportionate distribution of illegal migrants ultimately is. It's retribution for not voting the right way.
Yeah. Boy, you said that brilliantly. A border or a locked door at night is about keeping the ones inside that you love safe. Like if more people thought of it that way, okay, what good father loving his children would leave the front door open to let criminals through? You would say, no, they're terrible, right? So
exactly.
That's great. I mean, I have 2 dogs. They bark like crazy. They have one job in life. They sleep with my daughters at night, and they go berserk if someone comes in the house. That's it. That's the only purpose.
Their only job. That's right. That's right.
Is to love my children and bark like crazy if someone comes into my house. Right.
That's right.
But yeah, like Trump is trying to protect the people that he loves inside, the American people. Yes, we love migrants. I'm a migrant myself. Our family came over here. And yet you just can't let anyone through your front door. You can't let anyone through your border. You have to know who is coming in.
And keep in mind, who's Trump's wife? He's been married to over 20 years, right? Melania, who speaks 5 languages from Slovenia. I mean, this isn't about hating the people on the outside. It's about making sure whoever does come in is vetted, and we have a legal process for that vetting.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Final, just want to let people know, because this is such a great event. If they want to meet you and they want to meet me, and they are in the Orlando area on October 10th and 11th, there's going to be a link down below. Turley Talks is going to help through their relationship, provide you with a free ticket. You can meet Dr. Turley. You can meet Stephen Gardner. You can hear from these incredible keynote speakers. I'm going to put that down below, as well as a link to your new book and how to get that free chapter. Dr. Steve Turley, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for all you do. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, Stephen. Thank you so much.
All right. See you in Orlando.